think you got to trust the process, because this, so far, I've liked it a lot. I didn't think I would. I thought I was going to be stubborn and stick to my ways. But on the final match day that we're here, that we had this Golazo show, this mayhem, I think it was great.
Here is confirmation of the table through match day 8. It's Liverpool who win the league phase, 21 points from their 8 matches. Aston Villa jumping inside the top 8 from 9th. And confirmation that Manchester City did secure a place in the knockout round playoffs, finishing 22nd overall. It was Stuttgart who was eliminated, having lost to PSG. Now, this is where we get a little bit more complicated and we have to explain what happens in the next...
You mean you have to explain?
I have to explain and you have to try and figure it out. The next round of the tournament will feature playoff matches between the sides that finished between 9th and 24th in the table. The matchups will be determined by both seeding and a draw. Potential opponents in the draw are predefined by pairings of teams' final league positions. For example, teams finishing 9th and 10th will face the sides that ended 23rd or 24th. Teams finishing 11th or 12th will be drawn against either the 21st or 22nd place sides, and so on. Does that make any sense?
This is like the Farmer's Almanac.
Let's make it simple.
I'm trying to tell you how much snow we're going to get next winter.
Let's make it simple. You've got 2 teams here, PSG and Benfica. They can play either Monaco or Brest, and then they go through there, and then they'll face Liverpool or Barcelona in the round of 16. Same here. 2 teams there, and all the way through.
Explain it to me like I'm a 3-year-old.
Like a 2-year-old.
And then what happens?
Well, and then they go into the round of 16 draw and they can face Liverpool or Barcelona and so on. Lille or Aston Villa, Atletico, Bayer Leverkusen, Arsenal or Inter.
I think it is a little tricky for sure, but I will say also this: it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if you're going to win the Champions League, you're going to go through difficult moments. You're going to go through difficult matchups. I don't know if there's particularly any really easy matches from this point forward, anyway. So if you have to play one more, there's easier matches, but if you have to play one more extra difficult match, I think it's not going to be in the world. If you're destined to win it, we all know the Champions League winners are the ones that are the hottest in the right time.
It's also introduced a sense of jeopardy, and we had that today on match day 8. So many places to look who's going to get through, who's not. Then you've got that at the playoff stage, and then you've, of course, got it into the knockout stage. That, for me, that's something that's been added to the competition, because the old format, often in the group stages, you had these easy groups where you could pick exactly who was going to go through and who wasn't.
Well, we always had a group of death as well, right? We talked about that all the time. And there's always a surprise in Champions League. We know that, right? We see it just about every year. I think in the end, if we looked at the teams that were eliminated, we probably could have guessed a bunch of those. We probably would have picked a bunch of those teams. Look, I'm always open to the new format. This part of it doesn't make sense because I feel like we just spent 8 match days ranking teams, right? And now we're going to re-rank teams again, and that's the part that doesn't make sense.
They're sort of ranked.
I will also say, just for one example where it doesn't work, and not to say that the old format didn't have this as well, but can you imagine being Atletico Madrid and the campaign they've had in the Champions League and getting in the top 8? Now you're most likely facing a Real Madrid, Bayern, or Manchester City, so they're not really getting rewarded for being in
that happened in the past as well too. I mean, it happens if you're first place. Sometimes there's a team that comes through in second. I think that, I'll say, joking aside, I didn't like the format when it was first introduced, but I think you got to trust the process, because this, so far, I've liked it a lot. I didn't think I would. I thought I was going to be stubborn and stick to my ways, but on the final match day that we're here, that we had this Golazo show, this mayhem, I think it was great. And maybe we have to wait and be calm and see how it plays out come the end of the Champions League campaign.
Talking very much from a fan's perspective, but also, can you think from a manager and a player perspective? They're always talking in press conference, aren't they, about fixture congestion. We've got so many games, our players...
This is Champions League. Champions League is the top. Champions League is more valuable than Coppa Italia or FA Cup. So this is what you have to prioritize. And yeah, I get that it's more games. I mean, we enjoy it, being able to cover them and being fans of the game as well. But at the end of the day, this is Champions League is the top. There's no greater than this competition right here, and they're all desperate for a chance. And the flip side, by the way, is also for the smaller teams, I feel like there's more Cinderella stories here, because you get a team like Brest, who actually has a chance to go up in this league table. There's no calculation of, oh, if I finish in 3rd place in my group, I'm going to go to the Europa League, and oh, I could go on and win that competition. So in a sense, it does force teams like that to have to win games.
But let's pick up on something Ancelotti said recently, and he's a guy who's obviously had such a long career, and he's kind of seen the different phases of European football, and he said there's too many games. I don't like it, and it sounds like you agree with him.
Well, I think you asked from a managerial standpoint, of course you don't like the 2 extra games, especially if you're Real Madrid or you're Man City or you're Liverpool. You don't want extra games. I do love the fact that you don't drop down from one competition to another competition. Of course, they added 2 games to this, so they wouldn't be able to do that anyway. So that part of it makes complete sense. The other thing I guess you can say is we might see some of these bigger teams match up earlier, but that could happen in the other format. Look, this is the format we're going to live with. There's no doubt about it. Just the ranking part of it, that part to me just will never make sense. It just doesn't to me.
I love how mad you are about this.
I'm not mad. I'm trying to figure it out. Look, I understand what we're getting at here and how you're going to do it. It just, again, without repeating myself, I feel like we did this already.
Mm-hmm. Let's get to another fan question. Keep them coming in as well. If you have just joined us on YouTube, you can put them in the comments section and we'll react. Who will have the toughest progression from teams through positions 9 to 24 from Daily Aura?
Smiling.
Well, how can we figure it out? We don't know who it's this team or this team. Like,
if only there was a ranking system.
If only there was a ranking system, right? We could figure it out.
I mean, I will say it's from that group right there, right? It's from
this one,
that
right?
cluster
Celtic.
of really unbelievable
so
teams.
Just to confirm, you can have Real Madrid and Bayern. They can face Celtic or Manchester.
I mean, also, maybe I'm
They
missing
can't face
something
each
here,
other.
too, but probably the three best teams before the tournament started, or the biggest odds for them to win, were probably was Real Madrid, Bayern, and Manchester City. I would imagine that they were in the top 5, top 4, and to see them all in a cluster there, and then if the winner to that goes to Atletico Madrid, that to me is definitely the most difficult 9 through 24.
Well, that's where they belong. That's what happened. That was the result. So they're there not because of a draw. They're there because of their results.
Do you think there's some managers out there who will be feeling, having finished the league phase, well, if only we'd managed to get inside the top 8, we could have saved ourselves 2 extra games?
No doubt about it. Yeah, you look at Milan today, and they would look at this. Who else got? Atalanta's another one, right? That gets, although a more difficult game than Milan, at least we thought on paper had. So, yeah, and I wonder, going back even further, how many will look at it? Maybe I took my foot off the pedal with my roster decision on match day 4, which eventually affected you down the line.
Well, Real Madrid were a good example of that. Didn't manage to get back.
But Adam,
up to
if you don't get into the bye, right, and you've taken 5 Champions League match days off, I mean, a little bit like Inter. Inter played, again, I'm saying this for the 3rd time, but they've played their B team in 3 or 4 of those matchups, right? So they really double dipped, because not only did they get the bye, but they also got rest while they played in the competition as well. So I think that's another way to look at it. Is like, okay, maybe you don't get into the top 8, but also maybe you didn't put your full roster out for the entire 8-day competition as well. So maybe there's more ways to dissect it and sort of approach it as a manager.
Also, how important goal difference was. I mean, for all the managers, this is new. Nobody knew what it meant. Early on, everybody said, oh, this game's not going to matter that much. There's 8 games. It's forgiving. And then you come to the last match day, and you're seeing how many teams are paired up together, and everybody in the last moments are trying to get to the next round. So I think also for next season, there could be a different approach. Maybe people are going to take the approach like Inzaghi took for this Inter side. They're also able to for the roster that they have.
You look at Atalanta. They had an amazing campaign, right? They went for it every single game. They went for it in the Champions League, and then they fell short by 1 spot. They fell into the 9th spot. So really, they could have fell into the 24th spot if you look at it, depending on how random this draw is, because they're still going to have a difficult matchup moving forward anyway.
Do you think the winners of the Champions League this season comes from that group that were in the top 8 and got straight through to the round of 16? Or is there someone in here, I suppose I'm pointing towards Real Madrid, who might be able to go all the way and have come through the playoffs?
Tough question.
I mean,
it's tough to go. Yeah, it's tough to go past it. If you got to pick a line, I would think there's no doubt you pick this line right here. But it's tough to count a Real Madrid out or Bayern Munich out.
You got PSG up there as well, maybe?
Yeah, and I would think, with all the teams you mentioned earlier, if you had an outsider, Atletico Madrid, if someone asked you at the beginning to pick an outsider, who's a team, that might have been a team that you would have thrown in that category, right? So this is by far for me the most difficult. I think we agree, right? The most difficult group.
I mean, and also here, right? So Milan could play Juventus, right? Let's say one of them win, then they could potentially have to go and play Inter. Is that correct?
Inter will favor that, even though they lost.
But it could be that it could be that one Italian team knocks out the other 2 Italian teams also. So that's a funny little line also there. But again, in the last format was the same. There was moments that also didn't make sense and didn't add up. So it's still hard to see. We'll see moving forward. I think what's going to happen in the quarterfinals of this competition, we're going to have some juicy matchups.
Is there also a key here in terms of the messaging, and maybe because it's the first season of the format, once we get to season 2, 3, 4, people will start to figure it out. But I mean, we all know football, and it took us a little while to. I mean, we still don't know what's going on. The messaging from UEFA and everyone else to the fans to try and help them to understand. Okay, these are the games you're watching, and this is what it's going to do.
Yeah, I mean, they've tried to post videos on social media and do the explainers, and obviously as broadcasters of the league try to explain it, it's going to take time. There's a learning curve. I mean, I feel like there's always new rules, like even with the VAR and things that we have to explain. And if you have any older people in your house, I got to explain this to my dad like 15 times and got to figure out how it really goes. So you have to learn it first, and we have to be able to educate. And I think with time, people will come to understand. But then it becomes very simple. Inter, you got to go up and play against the best teams, period, no matter what.
Leave Gaetano Messina out of it, all right? Gaetano's smarter than you.
All right, I'm going to give him your number, and you're going to explain
Well,
it.
if Gaetano was watching that last segment, he still hasn't got a clue. You're going to have to
He's like
explain.
Grella.
He's reading the Farmer's Almanac right now.